Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're going to demystify something that honestly most homeowners absolutely dread, but very few actually understand. We're talking about the high-stakes science of professional water damage restoration. And look, we aren't just talking about grabbing a mop and throwing down a few towels. No, we're diving into the hardcore physics, the insanely strict timelines, and the literal biological threats that take over when water invades a home. To make this super concrete, we're going to use Reynoldsburg, Ohio as our real-world case study. We'll be pulling directly from professional restoration data in that specific area to show you exactly how a local disaster unfolds. All right, let's jump right into it.
So what actually happens exactly 24 hours after your home floods? You know, it's really easy to think of a flood as a single static event, right? Like a pipe breaks, water spills out, you shut the water off, and boom, the event is over. Well, wrong. The source material reveals that water damage is an incredibly active, ongoing, and rapidly escalating biological event. While you're busy frantically trying to find a plumber on your phone or moving your rugs out of the way, a ticking clock has already started, and the invisible damage happening behind your walls, it's literally multiplying by the hour.
And that brings us to the single most important number in this entire explainer, 60, as in 60 minutes. According to the restoration data, this is the vital emergency response window. If professional extraction begins within this critical 1-hour time frame, it can literally mean the difference between some minor cosmetic repairs and a massive catastrophic structural reconstruction. Water migrates into walls, subfloors, and insulation in a matter of minutes. It's incredibly fast, so beating that 60-minute clock is absolutely step one in saving a property.
Okay, let's move into Section 1, the geography of water damage.
Let's look at the specific threats facing our case study city of Reynoldsburg. Geography and infrastructure combine here to create, well, a perfect storm. First up, properties sitting near the Big Walnut and Blacklick Creeks face immediate, serious flood risks during heavy spring storms. Then, you've got to factor in the ground itself. The area is built on this clay-heavy soil which stubbornly holds on to moisture instead of letting it drain away. Add in the aging sewer systems in older established neighborhoods, complete with tree roots breaking through the pipes, and those harsh Ohio winter freeze-thaw cycles that just destroy uninsulated plumbing, and you can clearly see how the local environment is constantly testing a home's defenses.
Now, what's really fascinating here is this concept of hydrostatic pressure. You don't even need a massive record-breaking storm to completely flood a basement. When heavy rain hits that clay-heavy soil we just talked about, the ground gets totally saturated. And because that clay won't let the water just drain downwards, it creates this intense, trapped underground pressure right up against the home's foundation. This hydrostatic pressure literally forces water upward and inward through absolutely invisible foundation cracks, cove joints, and floor seams. It's crazy. The earth itself is basically pushing the water inside your house.
Moving on to Section 2, the ticking clock. Understanding the life cycle of a flood comes down to following a very strict timeline. At 0 hours, you have the initial intrusion, the pipe breaks. By hour 1, your emergency response window is already closing. But I want you to consider what happens at the 24 to 48-hour mark. Microscopic mold colonization begins. In any kind of humid climate, damp organic materials like your drywall and carpet padding become absolute breeding grounds for spores within a single day. You might not see it yet, but believe me, it's there. Finally, if you've caught it in time, the 3 to 5 day mark is the active structural drying phase. This requires massive industrial equipment running non-stop just to pull that moisture out.
The absolute crucial point here is avoiding what professionals in the industry call secondary damage. Think of this as the exponential multiplication of your restoration costs, all caused by delaying that initial extraction. The first water spill? That's just the primary damage, but the warping hardwood flooring, the rotting floor joists, and that creeping black mold inside your walls, that is secondary damage. And this is exactly why surface-level do-it-yourself cleanup almost always fails. You might get the surface feeling dry to the touch, but you're leaving all that hidden moisture behind to cause serious secondary destruction.
All right, Section 3, categories of contamination.
The actual source of the water completely dictates your entire survival strategy. Professionals divide water into 3 distinct categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think of a burst winter supply line. It's definitely destructive, but there's no immediate biohazard. Then, Category 2 is gray water. This would be an overflow from a washing machine or dishwasher, which carries some level of contamination. And then, there's Category 3, black water. This is your sewage backup. It is grossly contaminated with highly dangerous pathogens. Obviously, you cannot and should not treat a Category 3 toilet overflow the same way you treat a Category 1 clean pipe burst. The game plan has to be totally different. And the consequences of Category 3 Blackwater are incredibly severe. You just cannot simply dry out materials that have been soaking in raw sewage. Porous materials, things like your drywall, your carpet, the carpet padding underneath, they act like giant sponges for all those pathogens. If they get hit by Category 3 water, they have to be completely ripped out, safely disposed of as a biohazard, and fully replaced. There is absolutely no salvaging them.
Let's dive into Section 4, the science of drying.
Seriously, forget everything you think you know about just plugging in a household box fan in a wet room and hoping for the best. Real water restoration is based on hardcore physics, specifically a field called psychrometrics. This is the actual science of evaluating the thermodynamic properties of moist air. Professionals calculate vapor pressure, they measure specific humidity, and they actively manipulate the environment to physically pull moisture out of incredibly dense materials, like concrete and solid lumber, all without warping the home's framing. It is a highly controlled scientific process. And all of this intense science is strictly regulated by the IICRC S500. You can basically think of this as the ultimate industry rulebook. It's what separates the certified professionals, the folks who show up with thermal imaging cameras, penetrating moisture meters, and psychrometric charts, from amateur cleanup crews. The S500 standard dictates exactly how water should be classified, how a building must be inspected, and what the precise drying goals have to be to guarantee the structure is actually safe to live in again.
So let's walk through the exact step-by-step S500 protocol that the pros use. Step 1 is inspection and damage assessment. This is where they use infrared cameras to map out the hidden moisture inside your wall cavities. Step 2 is rapid, truck-mounted water extraction, physically vacuuming up thousands of gallons of standing water. Step 3 is active drying and dehumidification, deploying those massive industrial air movers and dehumidifiers to evaporate any remaining trapped moisture. And finally, Step 4 is cleaning and antimicrobial restoration, which involves applying EPA-registered treatments to ensure mold spores literally never get the chance to colonize.
But here's a great question. How do they actually know when they're finished? Well, the job definitely isn't done just because your living room floor feels dry to the touch. The specific scientific drying goal is to reduce the relative humidity in the affected space below 60%. The ultimate objective here is to achieve what's called equilibrium moisture content. That just means the internal humidity of the wood in the drywall has safely matched the natural, healthy baseline levels of the local climate. Until those penetrating industrial meters confirm that specific target number, the drying equipment just keeps running.
Let's tackle Section 5, navigating insurance claims.
Okay, the elephant in the room. Will your insurance actually pay for all of this? It's the biggest financial question every single homeowner has. The source material reveals a pretty stark contrast in how insurance adjusters view water damage. On one hand, you have sudden and accidental damage. Think of a frozen pipe bursting and flooding a room in minutes. This is typically covered. But on the other hand, you have gradual maintenance issues. This is like a slow, neglected leak under your kitchen sink that causes rot over several months. Insurance companies almost universally deny these claims. Basically, they expect you to actively maintain your home. So long-term decay is viewed as homeowner neglect, while sudden, unavoidable disasters are treated as covered events.
So how do you make absolutely sure you fall into that covered category? Here are some really actionable takeaways for winning your claim. First up, you have to act fast. File your claim within that crucial 24 to 72-hour window. Second, provide the adjuster with professional moisture mapping data. Third, supply daily equipment logs and time-stamped photos of the entire restoration process. And finally, maintain detailed records of your prior home maintenance to prove you haven't been neglecting the property. Honestly, having a professional restoration company that deeply understands those S500 standards generate this documentation for you, that is very often the ultimate key to forcing an insurance payout.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to remember this one golden rule. The cost of delayed action always exceeds the cost of immediate professional intervention. That quote perfectly captures the overarching theme of urgency we've been talking about. Waiting around to see if the water will just magically dry on its own is literally the most expensive mistake you can possibly make. The secondary damage, the black mold, the rotting structural beams, all of that will always cost you vastly more than just calling in the professionals at hour zero.
Which leaves us with one final provocative question to reflect on. I want you to look around the room you're sitting in right now. If a pipe bursts inside the wall right this very second, are you prepared to beat the 60-minute clock? You now understand the intense physics, the strict timelines, and the harsh insurance realities. The ticking clock is very, very real. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I truly hope you never actually have to use this knowledge, but if you do, you're now ready.